The mysterious discovery. In the deep reaches of space, where human colonies stretched far beyond Earth, Daniel Carter stood in the middle of an ancient ruin. The air was thick with dust, and the faint glow of his flashlight flickered against the walls covered in strange symbols. This place was old, far older than any human civilization. No one knew who built it or why it had been abandoned. Daniel was an explorer, a man who had spent years searching for lost relics of the past. But nothing he had ever found compared to what lay before him now. At the center of the ruin, resting on a stone pedestal, was a golden lamp. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, smooth, flawless, and shimmering as if light itself danced across its surface. His heart pounded. He had heard stories, legends of ancient objects that held great power, but he never thought he would find one. Curious, he reached out and touched the lamp. The moment his fingers brushed against it, the air around him crackled with energy. A gust of wind surged through the chamber, and a bright golden mist erupted from the lamp, spiraling upward like a living storm. Daniel stumbled back, shielding his eyes as the mist took shape. And then she appeared. A woman, unlike any he had ever seen, floated before him. Her skin shimmered with a soft golden hue, and her long flowing hair glowed like sunlight. Her deep blue eyes locked onto his with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. She wore ancient garments that seemed woven from the very stars, and golden bracelets adorned her wrists. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then, in a voice that was both powerful and melodic, she spoke. "You have awakened me, mortal. I am Zahara, the Genie of the lost ages. For breaking my slumber, you are granted 3 wishes." Daniel stared at her, his mind racing. This couldn't be real. Genies were myths, fairy tales. And yet here she was, standing before him, more real than anything he had ever known. Zahara watched him with curiosity, expecting him to demand riches, power, or perhaps immortality. That's what they all asked for. That's what humans always wanted. But Daniel did something no one had ever done before. He took a deep breath, looked straight into her eyes, and said, "I wish you were free." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Zahara's expression changed instantly. Her glowing eyes widened in shock, and her golden aura flickered. The chamber trembled, as if the universe itself had reacted to the impossible wish. "No, you can't do that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No one has ever wished for that." Chains of cosmic energy, invisible until now, shimmered around her wrists, binding her to the lamp. But as Daniel's wish took effect, cracks began forming in those chains. The entire ruin shook. The symbols on the walls burned with an ancient power, and a deep, distant hum echoed through the chamber. It was as if some higher force had awakened, sensing something that should never have happened. Zahara clutched her chest, gasping as an unfamiliar sensation washed over her. Was this freedom? Could it really be? Daniel stood firm, unshaken by the chaos around him. "No one should be a slave," he said, his voice calm but filled with certainty. "Not even a Genie." Zahara looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. He was different. Every human before him had only seen her as a tool, a means to an end. But this man, this human had wished for her freedom before even considering himself. But then, just as quickly as hope filled her, fear took its place. She turned sharply, scanning the room. "You don't understand what you've done," she said urgently. "If I am freed, the guardians of fate will come for us both." Daniel frowned. Guardians of fate? Before she could answer, the ruins trembled again. This time, not from Daniel's wish, but from something else. A deep, unearthly sound resonated through the chamber, a sound that did not belong to this world. Zahara's face paled. "They're coming." Daniel didn't know who they were, but he could see fear in her eyes. He clenched his fists. "Then we run." Zahara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. With a wave of her hand, The golden mist swirled around them, and in an instant, they vanished, just as the ancient ruin exploded into a blinding light, and the first of the guardians arrived. The hunt had begun. The unthinkable happens. The world shifted in a blur of golden mist. Daniel felt the strange sensation of being weightless, as if the universe itself had unraveled for a moment. Then, with a sharp pull, reality snapped back into place. He landed hard on a cold metal surface, gasping for breath. The air was no longer thick with dust, no longer filled with the eerie hum of ancient power. Instead, he heard the distant hum of machinery, the quiet beeping of a control panel. He sat up, blinking rapidly. They were no longer in the ruins. Instead, they were inside the cockpit of a spaceship. Sahara stood before him, her glowing form flickering like a candle in the wind. She looked shaken, something he hadn't expected from a being of immense power. Her hands trembled as she touched her wrists, where the last remnants of her cosmic chains still shimmered faintly before disappearing into nothingness. She was truly free, but instead of joy, there was only fear in her eyes. Daniel pulled himself to his feet. "Where are we?" Sahara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Far from the ruins. I teleported us to the nearest human spaceport." Daniel exhaled. That was good news. If they were in human territory, they had a chance. "Then what's wrong?" Sahara hesitated. Then she whispered, "They know." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "Who?" She closed her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was filled with an ancient sorrow. "The guardians of fate. They are the enforcers of cosmic law. I was created under their watch, bound by rules that should never have been broken. Your wish, it has disrupted the balance." As if to confirm her words, an alarm blared through the ship. Daniel turned sharply towards the control screen. The scanners were detecting something massive, something ancient. The screen flickered, struggling to process what it was seeing. A portal, swirling like a black storm, had opened in space right outside the station. Then they stepped through. The Guardians. Daniel had seen alien beings before. The galaxy was filled with strange creatures, but nothing compared to these. Towering figures of shifting darkness, wrapped in cloaks of pure energy. They had no faces, no eyes, no physical form except for the haunting silhouettes they cast against the void. They moved as if gliding through space, unaffected by gravity, untouched by time itself. And they were coming straight for them. Sahara clenched her fists. They will not listen. They will not negotiate. Their only goal is to correct what they see as a mistake. Daniel's mind raced. Then we have to run. Sahara turned to him, sorrow in her eyes. We can't run forever. The ship shuddered violently as the Guardians reached out, their presence distorting reality itself. Space around them folded, gravity twisted in impossible directions. A voice, deep and ancient, filled the cockpit without sound. The wish must be undone. Daniel gritted his teeth. Over my dead body. Sahara's eyes burned with sudden determination. She had been afraid, but now she realized what this human had done was not a mistake. It was a choice, his choice. He had freed her, not for power, not for selfish reasons, but because he believed it was right. And she would not let that choice be erased. Sahara raised her hands. Then we fight. The ship groaned as she unleashed a surge of golden energy, forming a barrier around them just as the Guardian struck. A shockwave rippled across the station, sending debris flying into the void. Daniel grabbed the controls. I hope you know how to win against cosmic gods. Sahara smirked, though there was steel in her gaze. I was never allowed to fight before. Let's see what happens now. And with that, the battle began. The cosmic chase begins. The ship shuddered violently as Sahara's golden energy clashed against the overwhelming force of the Guardians. Sparks rained from the cockpit's control panels. Alarms screamed in warning, and reality itself seemed to tremble under the weight of the cosmic battle. Daniel gritted his teeth, gripping the pilot's controls as the ship was hurled backward by an unseen force. "Whatever you're doing, Zahara, do it faster." Zahara stood in the center of the cockpit, her radiant form burning with newfound power. Her eyes blazed like twin suns, her once-bound essence now unleashed. But despite her strength, she looked uneasy. "I have never fought them before, Daniel. I was always their prisoner, their tool. I don't know what I am truly capable of." Daniel glanced at the sensors. The Guardians were closing in, their void-like figures distorting the space around them. "Then you better learn fast, because they're not giving us a choice." The ship trembled again as another wave of energy washed over it. The Guardians weren't attacking in a traditional sense. They were unraveling the space around them, trying to rewrite reality itself to erase Zahara's existence. Daniel punched the ship's thrusters, but the ship barely moved, caught in the gravitational pull of the Guardians. It was like trying to escape quicksand. "We need a way out," Daniel shouted. Zahara's gaze darted around, her mind racing. Then she raised her hands and whispered something in an ancient language. The golden markings on her arms flared to life. For a moment, everything stopped. The ship, the alarms, even the oppressive force of the Guardians, all were frozen in time. Daniel gasped, feeling the weight of stillness pressing against his body. What did you do?" Zahara's expression was strained. "I slowed time, but only for a few moments. We need to leave. Now." Daniel didn't waste a second. He slammed his fist against the console, activating the emergency hyperjump. A loud warning flashed on the screen. "Gravity well DTCTE. HYPE or AGUMP, highly dangerous." Daniel cursed. The Guardians were warping space around them, making it nearly impossible to jump. If they attempted it, they could be torn apart mid-jump. But they had no choice. "Hold on," Daniel roared as he activated the jump. The engines roared, and in an instant, the ship was yanked forward, into the unknown, the aftermath of the jump. The ship burst out of hyperspace, tumbling violently as it emerged in a desolate part of the galaxy. Warning lights flashed all over the control panel, and Daniel struggled to regain control as they spun wildly through the void. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ship steadied. Daniel exhaled, slumping in his seat. "We made it." Zahara, however, didn't look relieved. She stood at the viewport, staring out at the empty expanse of space. Daniel frowned. "What's wrong?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. I don't recognize this place." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" "We were supposed to land near human space." She shook her head. "The Guardians interfered with the jump. We've been thrown far, very far." Daniel checked the navigation panel, his stomach sinking. She was right. There were no known star systems nearby. No colonies. No trade routes. They were in the middle of nowhere. He swore under his breath. "Great. Now what?" Zahara hesitated. Then, slowly, she placed a hand on the viewport. "We need to figure out why they fear my freedom so much." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You mean aside from the fact that you're probably the most powerful being in the galaxy?" She shook her head. "No, it's something else. Something bigger. The Guardians enforce balance, but I was never meant to be freed. There is something they are hiding, something they don't want me to remember." Daniel stared at her. "You think your existence is part of a bigger secret?" She nodded. "And I intend to find out what it is." For the first time, Zahara looked truly determined. She was no longer a prisoner, no longer a tool of fate. She was free. And she was ready to uncover the truth. But before they could even plan their next move, the ship's warning systems blared to life. Unidentified OBGCT 8PP Roishing. Massive Energy Signature DETCTED. Daniel and Zahara turned sharply toward the viewport. Emerging from the darkness of space was something enormous. A ship, A creature? No, it was something older, something ancient, and it was waiting for them. The unexpected power of humanity. The ship's alarms blared with increasing urgency, flooding the cockpit with red lights. Warning. Unidentified OGECTAPPUROACHAIN. Extreme energy LEVELS DETCTED. Daniel tightened his grip on the controls. He didn't know what was out there, but whatever it wasn't friendly. Zahara stood motionless at the viewport, her glowing blue eyes locked on the swirling darkness outside. Through the endless void of space, a massive form emerged. At first, it looked like a derelict space station, floating lifelessly in the abyss. But then, it moved. The structure twisted unnaturally, shifting like a living entity, its form stretching and contorting as though reality itself couldn't contain it. A deep, guttural hum vibrated through the ship's hull. It wasn't just a signal, it was a presence, an ancient force reaching out across space. "What in the hell is that?" Daniel muttered. Zahara's face was grim. "That is something I had hoped never to see." Daniel turned to her. "You know what this is?" She nodded slowly. "I think so. This is what the Guardians were trying to stop. This is what they were hiding from me." Daniel swallowed. "And that would be?" Zahara's expression darkened. "A celestial prison. And whatever's inside it is waking up." The forgotten threat. The ship trembled as a deep, unnatural force pulled at it. It wasn't gravity, and it wasn't a weapon. It was something worse. It was as if the very fabric of the universe was bending, warping in response to whatever was inside that colossal structure. Daniel's fingers flew over the control panel. "I don't care what it is, we're getting the hell out of here." But the moment he tried to engage the thrusters, the ship refused to move. The screens flickered wildly. Systems went haywire. It was like the ship itself was being rewritten. Its existence pulled apart at the seams. Zahara stepped forward, raising her hands. A golden light pulsed from her fingertips, surrounding them in a protective shield. The shaking stopped instantly. But then, a voice, low and vast, ancient beyond time, spoke. "You are not the one I seek." Daniel's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a voice. It was inside his mind, inside his very thoughts. The shadows around the massive structure twisted, and from its depths, something began to emerge. A form, titanic, featureless, shifting like a liquid shadow, slowly pulled itself free from the prison. It had no face, no eyes, no shape that the mind could truly comprehend. But it knew them, it saw them, and it spoke Zahara's name. "The lost one, you are finally free." Zahara's breath caught. "No." Daniel looked at her, his voice sharp. "Zahara, what is that thing?" She shook her head, panic creeping into her normally calm demeanor. "I don't know, but it knows me." The beam drifted forward, tendrils of shifting darkness extending toward them. "Come forth, child. Your fate was never meant to be denied." Zahara clenched her fists, golden light burning around her. "I don't know you. I don't belong to you. I am free." The beam rumbled with what might have been amusement. "You believe yourself to be free." The shadows curled around them, closing in like an eclipse, swallowing the last rays of light. And then it struck. A wave of crushing force slammed into the ship, tearing at the shield Zahara had created. The golden light flickered, threatening to collapse. Daniel grabbed her arm. "Zahara, we need a way out." She closed her eyes, focusing every ounce of her power into holding the barrier. "I can't hold it forever. We need to push back." Daniel exhaled sharply, running through their options in his head. They couldn't escape through normal means. The Guardians had warped space, and now this thing was rewriting reality itself. They needed something stronger, something impossible. Then it hit him. "Zahara, what happens if I make another wish?" She turned to him, her glowing blue eyes widening. "Daniel, no. Wishes are unstable. If we use another one here, in the presence of this thing, the consequences could be. We don't have time for consequences. He snapped. I need you to trust me. Zahara hesitated. Then, with a sharp nod, she whispered, then wish carefully. Daniel took a deep breath, staring at the swirling darkness before him. And then, with every ounce of determination in his soul, he spoke. I wish you had your full power back. The universe shook. A deafening silence fell over the void. And then Zahara changed. The birth of something new. Golden flames erupted from Zahara's body, engulfing her in a blinding radiance. The celestial prison trembled, cracks forming across its surface as her energy surged through the cosmos. The being of shadows recoiled, its form twisting violently. What have you done? Zahara's eyes snapped open. No longer just glowing blue, they were now pure gold, burning like twin suns. Her hair flowed with streaks of fire, her aura stretching across the endless void. For the first time in her existence, she was complete. And she was angry. She raised her hands, and the golden energy surged outward in a wave of sheer, uncontained power. The dark entity screamed. The celestial prison cracked apart, shattering into a billion fragments as Zahara unleashed everything she had been denied for millennia. Daniel shielded his eyes as the sheer force of it all sent shockwaves rippling through space, and when the dust settled, the entity was gone, vanished, erased. Zahara lowered her hands, her breathing heavy. Daniel, still gripping the ship's controls, exhaled shakily. Remind me never to piss you off. Zahara turned to him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. I remember now. Daniel frowned. Remember what? She slowly clenched her fists, gazing out into the void. Why the Guardians feared me. Why I was imprisoned. She turned back to him, her expression solemn. Daniel, I wasn't just a Genie. I was something else entirely. She paused. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke the words that would change everything. I was meant to end the gods. Daniel felt his stomach drop. What? But before he could process the weight of her words, the ship's sensors flared red. Multiple WARP Sci-Fi HURES DETCTED Guardians of FAT-AP Pro-HHing. The Guardians were back. And they weren't alone. The battle wasn't over. It was only just beginning. A battle against cosmic gods. The ship's alarms screamed as the Guardians of Fate arrived in force. The very fabric of space warped, shuddering under the weight of their presence. Their cloaked figures emerged from the void, each one radiating an aura of crushing inevitability. There were dozens of them now, more than Daniel had ever imagined. Each Guardian was a towering entity, their forms shifting between shadow and light, their edges flickering as if the universe itself struggled to define them. Warning. Extreme energy levels DTECTED. Reality distortion at critical levels. Daniel gritted his teeth. I'm guessing they're not here to talk. Zahara's golden eyes burned as she stood at the viewport, her form pulsing with newfound power. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, raising her hand. The Guardians did not flinch. One of them, larger than the rest, glided forward. When it spoke, its voice was not a voice. It was a presence, a force that echoed directly into their minds. You have gone too far, Lost One. This cannot be allowed. Zahara's expression was cold. I have done nothing but claim what was rightfully mine. I was imprisoned for reasons I do not yet understand. And now you come to take that from me again. The Guardian's form flickered. Your existence is a danger to the balance. You are a weapon that should have never been awakened. Stand down, and we will grant you oblivion. Daniel scoffed. Hell of an offer. Zahara's lips curled in a dangerous smirk. And if I refuse? The Guardian's next words sent a chill down Daniel's spine. Then we erase you, and everything connected to you. Zahara's fingers twitched. Golden light surged through her body, and for the first time, Daniel saw something terrifying. She was smiling. "You can try." Then the battle began. The clash of titans. The first attack came without warning. One of the guardians raised an ethereal arm, and in an instant, space itself bent. The stars warped, their light twisted into spirals as a gravitational shockwave slammed into the ship. Daniel was thrown against the console, barely managing to hold on. The force alone should have torn them apart, but Zahara moved swiftly, raising the shimmering shield around the vessel. The golden energy clashed against the Guardian's attack, sending ripples through space. But that was only the beginning. 3 more Guardians moved in, each raising their hands. Reality itself fractured as they reached through the dimensions, twisting the laws of physics to crush Zahara where she stood. But Zahara was no longer a prisoner. She was no longer a tool of fate. She was fate. With a flick of her wrist, golden chains erupted from her body, lashing out like celestial whips. They struck the Guardians, coiling around their forms and pulling them backward. Energy crackled in the void as Zahara pushed back against the very beings who once held her captive. Daniel could barely comprehend what he was witnessing. He had seen wars, battles fought with technology. But this was something else entirely. This was gods clashing in the void. But the Guardians were not done. From the depths of space, a new force emerged, a massive construct, forged from pure energy and celestial law. It was a prison, a weapon designed to hold beings like Zahara. It was the Null Arc, a device built to erase anything deemed unfit for existence. And it was aimed directly at them. Warning: reality QOLAPSEDEKCTED. Zahara's eyes widened. No, not again. Daniel gripped the controls. What the hell is that? Zahara's voice was tight. A failsafe. If the Guardians cannot erase me, they will erase everything around me. The Null Arc pulsed. Its core began to glow, building energy for a single devastating attack. An erasure wave. Daniel's stomach twisted. We need a way out. Can you stop it? Zahara exhaled, her gaze locked on the incoming destruction. I can, but not alone. She turned to him, golden light swirling around her. Daniel, I need your will. Your wish. One last time. Daniel's breath caught. The last time he had wished for something, it had changed the entire course of reality. And now he had to do it again. He swallowed hard. What do you need? Zahara stepped closer. Wish for this. She pressed her palm against his chest, and instantly his mind was filled with images, visions of what could be. A world where she was no longer hunted. A world where the Guardians had no power over her. A world where she was truly free. A world where fate itself was rewritten. Daniel clenched his fists. He had seen the impossible before. But this was something beyond even that. He met Zahara's gaze, heart pounding. And then he made his wish. I wish that fate itself could not control you anymore. For a single breathless moment, the universe stood still. The end of fate. The Null Arc fired. A wave of pure erasure surged toward them, tearing through reality itself. But Zahara caught it. Her body burned like a living star, her golden aura expanding outward, consuming the attack before it could reach them. The Guardians recoiled. Their forms flickered violently, their balance shattered. Zahara rose above them, her body glowing brighter than anything Daniel had ever seen. She raised her hands, and for the first time in history, the Guardians of Fate were forced to kneel. Zahara's voice rang out across the void, filled with unshakable power. No more. With a single, final motion, she unleashed everything. A shockwave of golden energy expanded across the battlefield. The Guardians screamed as their control unraveled, their hold on the universe shattered. The Null Arc collapsed, its energy dispersing like mist in the wind. And just like that, they were free. Daniel gasped for breath. staring at the aftermath. The guardians were gone. The battlefield was silent. Zahara floated before him, her eyes still burning gold. But now, they were softer, more human. She stepped forward, reaching out her hand. "It's over." Daniel hesitated, then took her hand. A grin pulled at his lips. "So, what now?" Zahara exhaled, for the first time in her life, without chains. "Now, we decide our own fate." And with that, they vanished into the stars, free at last. The final wish. Silence filled the vast emptiness of space. Where once the guardians of fate had loomed, only distant stars remained. The null arc had been obliterated, its core reduced to nothingness. The cosmic battlefield had been wiped clean, and for the first time in an eternity, Zahara was truly free. Daniel stood at the edge of the ship's cockpit, his breath still heavy, his pulse still racing. He had just witnessed the impossible, a battle of gods, a rewriting of fate itself. And yet, here he was, still standing, still alive. He turned to Zahara, who hovered just above the floor, her golden aura flickering like the final embers of a dying sun. She looked different now. Not just powerful, human. Her celestial glow had softened. Her once blazing golden eyes now carried something new. Uncertainty. Daniel frowned. "Zahara, what's wrong?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slowly raised her hands, looking at them as if they belonged to someone else. "I can feel it," she murmured. Daniel took a cautious step forward. "Feel what?" She exhaled shakily. "Time. Choice. The weight of my own existence. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I was always bound by the guardians, by the lamp, by the cosmic laws that made me what I was. But now," she trailed off, eyes searching the void as if looking for answers. Daniel crossed his arms. "That's what you wanted, right? Freedom." Zahara let out a small, hollow laugh. "Yes, but freedom is heavy." Daniel tilted his head. He had seen that look before, the look of someone who had spent too long as a prisoner and had suddenly been handed the keys to their own fate. "You don't know what to do next, do you?" Zahara turned to face him. For the first time, she looked vulnerable. "I don't." A truth long buried. Daniel sighed, leaning against the control panel. "Well, you're not the only one. I didn't exactly plan on fighting cosmic deities today either." That got a small smile out of her, but it faded quickly. "Daniel, I need to know." She hesitated, then asked, "Why did you wish for my freedom?" Daniel frowned. "I told you before, no one should be a slave." "Yes, but..." Zahara's expression darkened. "You didn't know me. You could have wished for anything. Riches, power, immortality. But you didn't. And now you've risked everything for me. Twice." She stepped closer, her glowing gaze piercing into him. "So tell me the truth. Why?" Daniel inhaled sharply. He wasn't sure how to explain it. Maybe it was because he had always hated the idea of powerless beings being used. Maybe it was because, for all of humanity's flaws, they had always fought for their own right to choose their own destiny. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because Zahara had never been given a choice. "Because I believed you deserved it." His voice was steady. "Because someone had to." Zahara studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. But then, something inside her seemed to shift. A realization. A certainty. "Then I will honor that choice," she said quietly. Daniel arched an eyebrow. "How?" She hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she spoke words that sent a shiver down his spine. "By granting you your final wish." The cost of power. Daniel blinked. "Wait, I still have one wish left." Zahara nodded. "Yes, but be warned, this is no longer a wish made under the laws of fate. The guardians are gone. The balance is shattered. Your final wish will be made under my power alone." Daniel frowned. "And that means..." Zahara's eyes darkened. It means that whatever you wish for will become absolute. No law of the universe will be able to alter it. Daniel swallowed hard. That kind of power, it was terrifying. He could change anything with just a few words. Zahara stepped closer, lowering her voice. So choose carefully, Daniel. This wish could reshape reality itself. A cold weight settled in his chest. This was it. This was the moment. He could wish for anything. He could restore Earth to a golden age. He could bring back the lost civilizations of the past. He could make himself immortal, powerful beyond imagination. And yet, he looked at Zahara. She had been trapped for millennia, forced to grant wishes for beings who saw her as nothing more than a tool. She had never known freedom, never known what it was to live. And for the first time, Daniel knew exactly what to wish for. His voice was soft but unwavering. I wish for you to have a life of your own. Zahara's breath hitched. What? Daniel stepped forward. No more cosmic chains. No more predetermined fate. I don't want you to be a genie. I don't want you to be a goddess. I want you to be Zahara, a person who gets to make her own choices, her own future. Zahara's glowing form flickered. Something inside her cracked, not in a painful way, but in a way that felt like breaking free. Her golden aura pulsed, then exploded outward. The ship trembled as raw, unfiltered power surged through the air. The very stars outside seemed to shimmer in response. Zahara gasped as a rush of energy flowed through her. Her hands trembled, her form shifting, solidifying, becoming something new. She looked down at herself, eyes wide. Her cosmic glow was fading. Her golden flames were settling. She was changing. For the first time in her existence, she felt human. Tears filled her golden eyes. You really wished for that? Daniel nodded. I did. And then, for the first time in her immortal life, Zahara cried. Not in sadness, not in fear, but in relief. She took a shuddering breath, looking at her hands, her skin, her body. The power was still there, but now it was hers. No longer forced upon her, no longer demanded of her. She had been given the one thing no God, no force in the universe had ever given her, a choice. She looked up at Daniel, her gaze filled with something new, something real. Thank you. Daniel grinned, offering his hand. Come on, Zahara. Let's see what the universe has in store for you. She took his hand, and for the first time, she truly felt alive. As their ship disappeared into the depths of space, two beings, one human, one no longer bound by fate, set forth into the unknown. Not as master and genie, not as prisoner and rescuer, but as equals. And somewhere, in the endless void of the cosmos, fate itself whispered in awe. A wish well made. A new beginning. The vast emptiness of space stretched before them, an ocean of stars glittering like diamonds scattered across a velvet abyss. The ship drifted in silence, its engines powered down, allowing the two unlikely travelers a moment to breathe. Daniel sat at the control panel, his fingers drumming against the metal as he stared at the endless cosmos ahead. The events of the past few days felt unreal, waking Zahara, defying the Guardians, rewriting fate itself. And now, after everything, he glanced over at her. She was different now. Zahara stood near the viewport, staring at her own reflection in the glass. Her golden glow had dimmed, her celestial energy had settled, and for the first time in her immortal existence, she was bound by nothing. No chains, no cosmic laws, no fate dictating her purpose. She was free. Yet, despite everything, there was hesitation in her golden eyes. Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. All right, Zahara, you got what you wanted. You're free. So tell me. He smirked. What's the first thing a former cosmic genie does with her new life? Zahara blinked, as if pulled from a deep thought. She turned to face him, lips parting, but no words came. A heavy silence stretched between them. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You don't know, do you?" Zahara exhaled, running a hand through her shimmering hair. "I've never had to think about it before," she admitted, her voice quieter than usual. "For millennia, I was given a single purpose: granting wishes, serving masters, following rules I never made. Now, for the first time, I am allowed to decide." She looked back at her reflection. "And I don't know what I want." Daniel studied her carefully. He had seen this before. Soldiers returning from war, prisoners finally freed after years of captivity, people who had spent their entire lives following orders, only to realize that freedom came with a terrifying question. Now what? He sighed, standing up. "Come on." Zahara looked at him, confused. "Where?" Daniel grinned. "We're going planet-side. You need to see what it actually means to live. The first step into life." The planet they landed on was called Haven's Reach, a peaceful colony nestled on the edge of human space. Unlike the advanced megacities of Earth or the militarized frontier worlds, Haven's Reach was quiet, simple. Green fields, bustling markets, warm sunlight. It was a place for people, not empires. Daniel and Zahara stepped onto the streets, blending into the crowd. Zahara walked slowly, her gaze darting around, taking in everything. The smell of fresh food being cooked in the market stalls, the laughter of children playing in the streets, the chatter of people living ordinary, unspectacular lives. She stopped at a small vendor selling fruit. The old man behind the stall smiled at her. "Something catch your eye, miss?" Zahara hesitated, staring at the colorful selection. Daniel stepped beside her. "You ever eaten before?" Zahara shook her head. "I've never needed to." Daniel smirked. "Well, first lesson of being human. Food is amazing." She reached out and picked up a small, bright blue fruit, holding it as if it were the most delicate thing in the universe. Slowly, cautiously, she took a bite. Her eyes widened. Daniel chuckled. "Not bad, huh?" Zahara swallowed, placing a hand over her mouth, her expression unreadable. Then, for the first time since she had been freed, she laughed. It was soft at first, like a gentle breeze. Then it grew, a warm, real laugh that echoed in the air. Daniel couldn't help but smile. For the first time, Zahara wasn't a god. She wasn't a genie. She was just herself. The weight of immortality. As the day went on, Zahara experienced things she never had before. Tasting food, walking barefoot through soft grass, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin, not as an eternal being, but as a living person. Yet, as the sun set over Haven's Reach, she sat quietly on a hilltop, staring at the horizon. Daniel sat beside her, sensing her thoughts were far away. "You're thinking about them, aren't you?" he asked. Zahara didn't look at him. "The Guardians, or the thing we fought in the void?" Daniel shrugged. "Both." She exhaled. "They feared me for a reason, Daniel. They called me the Lost One. They said my existence was dangerous. Even that thing in the prison." She shuddered. "It knew me." Her fingers dug into the grass. "What if I am dangerous? What if I was made for something terrible?" Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You ever hear about the first human superweapon?" Zahara turned to him, confused. "No." Daniel leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the darkening sky. "Back on Earth, a long time ago, we created the most powerful weapon in our history, a weapon that could wipe out entire cities in a single moment." Zahara frowned. "Did your people fear it?" Daniel nodded. "At first, they knew it could destroy the world. But do you know what happened next?" Zahara shook her head. Daniel smirked. "We learned that power wasn't the problem. It was the hands that held it. And over time, we didn't just use it for war. We used it to power cities, to explore the stars, to create something better." He turned to her. "Power doesn't define you, Zahara. What you choose to do with it does." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Then I choose to create something better. The road ahead. As night fell over Haven's Reach, Daniel and Zahara walked back toward their ship, side by side. She turned to him with a curious expression. So, what do humans do when they don't know where to go next? Daniel smirked. We explore. Zahara raised an eyebrow. And where are we exploring? Daniel stretched his arms. Wherever we want. You ever been to the Corin Nebula? They've got floating cities and markets the size of moons. Zahara smiled. Then let's go. As their ship lifted off, leaving the peaceful world behind, Zahara looked back one last time, watching the lights of the colony disappear into the darkness. She had been born into servitude, built as a tool, feared as a weapon. But now, for the first time in history, she was something more. She was Zahara, a traveler, a wanderer. And for the first time in her immortal life, she was truly, wonderfully alive.